You read that right. I have two girlfriends, not one, but two. Two absolutely beautiful bombshells. And their names are peace and quiet. I'm joking, but I'm also not. Men who genuinely enjoy staying home instead of going out, going out on the town, they tend to confuse people because it doesn't line up with how success or masculinity usually gets sold to people. This solitude, this staying home thing, it gets mistaken a lot for avoidance when often it's just a preference. It's also necessary because peace and quiet are necessary, and that is how you maintain it, is by staying home. But yeah, I mean, a man who stays in by choice, what he does is he disrupts the idea that fulfillment, it has to be this loud and busy thing that has to be witnessed by people. That kind of contentment, it raises suspicion because it doesn't perform for anyone. And that's part of the point. Because guess what? Performing is very exhausting and it's inauthentic. When people don't understand that, they start looking for flaws automatically. That's why you get these words like antisocial and boring, or oh, he must be unambitious. Those get thrown around because these particular labels, they make their discomfort easier to handle and manage. And of course, if they can't find one, or if they want to stack on more labels, then they'll just invent one. So, and then you'll get this from people in your life potentially. This unsolicited concern will show up on your doorstep, but it's veiled and disguised as advice, right? The old hey, I'm worried about you, blah blah blah, right? What actually unsettles people isn't what you're doing, but how settled and calm you seem while doing it. And in our particular culture, that tends to treat constant motion as proof of worth, your stillness, your preference to stay in, it starts to look like something must be wrong with you, right? A man who isn't chasing constant stimulation, he forces others to notice how much they are. He becomes a mirror for those individuals. And that's why a dumb little joke about peace and quiet, it ends up carrying more weight on the back end than people expect. Because there's an unspoken rule that most people, they absorb early on. And that is that if you're not being seen, then you're not really a part of what's happening. You're not a part of the buzz. And if you're not a part of the buzz, then the assumption is that you must be falling behind somewhere. You must be falling behind in life in some capacity. And so when a man says that he prefers to stay home to, I don't know, read or to think, maybe he's building something that means a lot to him. So he's building quietly. He doesn't really talk about it because he's focused. Or maybe he's letting his mind settle. He had a long day, for which there are many of those. But yeah, most people, they don't register that as a choice. For them, they hear it as some confession. And what they do is they develop these assumptions. And these assumptions, or one of these assumptions being that he must not get invited anywhere. He doesn't get invitations. And if he isn't getting invitations from other people, that must be because he doesn't know how to move in social spaces. He must not understand social cues or how to operate amongst people. And if it's not a lack of social skills, then it must be something else, right? Maybe he's burnt out, or he's giving up on life. Some kind of limitation. Very few people stop to consider that he may have just looked at the noise and counted the cost and decided, yeah, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth paying, so I'm not going to pay it. And that kind of decision never gets credit because it doesn't announce itself. I'd rather live my life than explain it. There's no signal flare when a man realizes that most social activity is draining and it takes away more than it gives back. You do an ROI analysis, but yeah, there's no gesture of approval when when someone notices that constant engagement, it fractures attention instead of sharpening it. Staying in for him isn't retreating from life. It's choosing which parts of life deserve access. It's deciding where his energy actually goes instead of letting it be claimed by default. And recognizing that, hey, availability is expensive and not everything is worth the price. Time and energy are way more valuable when you're 40 versus when you're 20. But yeah, I mean, people, they mistake that restraint for lack because they're used to measuring value by optics, by visibility, what they can see. And they're confused by that man's silence and selectivity. And so they mischaracterize his actions and his intent. What they fail to realize is they're witnessing a man who's already done the process of sorting. And once you've done that kind of sorting, going out just to be seen, no, that is wildly unnecessary. Don't need to be seen. But yeah, men who prefer staying home, they get treated differently because what they do is that they quietly violate an expectation most people never question. And while masculinity, it does have internal and external markers, it's still judged first from the outside. It's measured, it's quantified by who you know, where you show up, and how visible your life looks. So your level of busyness and presence, what happens is it becomes proof of relevance and value. And a man who steps outside of that framework, especially without apologizing for it, what he does is he exposes how much of it is performance. He is not in the business of collecting stories to tell later. Dude's got enough. Believe me. Building his status through proximity of others to impress? No. Sorry. Waste of time. But yeah, that absence, it creates this tension because if someone can be settled without that level, without that effort, it forces comparison, and that is uncomfortable. It puts a mirror up to these other individuals. And instead of these individuals questioning the system, they inspect the man who opted out. And they lower his status in their own minds to make the contrast less threatening to them. And so his presence gets reframed as a flaw that needs to be explained. It needs explaining. And you don't provide the explanation. Forget about it. But yeah, calling him strange, it's way easier for them to do that than admit that he might just be an unburdened individual. And so labeling him defective is the safer route. It's safer than considering that he may have, escaped a game that they're still playing and stuck in. And that's precisely why his calmness, it gets treated like something suspicious instead of something that he earned. And quite frankly, something rare and valuable. And this is a very crucial part here that I'm about to say, because a lot of people aren't privy to this. They miss it entirely. Men who genuinely enjoy being home, they tend to be more stable than they appear. They don't rely on constant stimulation to regulate themselves. Silence doesn't unsettle them, not in the slightest. They can sit with their own thoughts without needing to escape them. That ability alone is rare and valuable, especially in 2025 going into 2026. It will forever be valuable and rare. Hopefully not rare forever, but for now it is. It's very rare. But yeah, it means that they aren't handing their mood over to whatever happens to be happening around them. It doesn't shift with whichever way the wind is blowing. They tend to pause before they speak instead of being reactive. They don't react on impulse. They'll respond if it's merited. They're not reactive in the slightest. They're also very perspicacious individuals in that they notice patterns because their attention isn't fragmented. They aren't distracted. They have focus. And they conserve energy instead of burning it just to look busy and impressive to other people. What was that? There was a quote from Garden State. I forgot the guy that digs graves. He was hitting his bong, and he was telling Zach Braff's character, Largeman, that I forgot what is that quote? He says something about he doesn't care about being impressive. He sleeps better. And there is a lot of truth to that statement while he's in his tidy whities hitting his bong. But I digress. I wish I knew the exact quote. I'm just paraphrasing, but it's apropos for what I'm talking about. But yeah, there's a lot of energy conservation going on, especially in your 40s versus your 20s. But yeah, they're more intentional. You're more intentional, a man who stays home. Whatever you're building it slowly and deliberately. And these men, they choose relationships very carefully because they aren't trying to fill empty space. There is not a void that they're trying to fill. And none of this makes them dull. It makes them selective. And selectivity in the culture that we live in, well, it almost guarantees misunderstanding. And these men that stay home, they tend to be the best men that you can possibly know because like I said, their attention isn't scattered. When they show up, they're actually present. And by God, they are committed individuals. When they commit to something, they don't hedge their bets and keep 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They are 10 toes in. And when they listen, by God, they're listening. They are intent. They aren't up in their heads just rehearsing their next line or scanning the room, playing a solo game of I Spy while you're talking to them. They hear you. They are seeking to understand you. If you are a person of depth, well, by God, they want to swim in your ocean. God, that was cheesy, but you get it. They don't treat people like an audience. They have no need to control the atmosphere to feel secure about themselves or to signal their status through who they're seen with. Guess what? They're home alone. They're not seen with anyone. They don't care because they've already developed an internal sense of who they are and where they stand. And that internal grounding, it gives them a firm foundation and makes them steady in relationships. They don't they aren't codependent. They don't become dependent on anyone else. It allows for a confidence to show up, a quiet confidence. It doesn't announce itself. It gives them independence, but without turning them distant or guarded. Once there is trust established, there must be trust established, of course. But they don't need other people to fill gaps in their identity. Hence why they're steady in relationships without becoming dependent. That's what I mean by that. And because of that, because they don't need other people for their identity, the connection that they offer is chosen by them. It's not extracted from them. And chosen connection, it tends to be the kind that lasts because it's real. It's authentic. But yeah, our society doesn't reward this type of man. Society, it has a tendency to reward what it can see and measure and react to quickly. That's precisely why depth doesn't register well in systems that are built around attention, for which there are many. The stillness doesn't signal value in cultures driven by visibility and optics. Therefore, men who perform, who don't perform, who prefer not to perform, they don't feed that economy. They aren't constantly visible. They aren't amplifying trends. They aren't broadcasting their inner life. They don't reinforce the idea that being alive means being everywhere at once, all the time. And because of that, they don't fit neatly into incentive structures, especially ones that shape status. There's no obvious way to reward someone who isn't asking to be noticed. But yeah, so instead of being elevated, they're overlooked and excluded, and often quietly, but the message is still received nonetheless. We get it. But yeah, I mean, this kind of man, this isn't the kind of man the system knows how to use. And anything that can't be easily used rarely gets encouraged. That type of man isn't one that they want replicated. No, there's a lot of social engineering going on right now to make that possible, so that type of man is not replicated. But yeah, and for good reason. If you're a student of history and totalitarianism, it makes sense as to why that is. But that's, of course, a heavier topic for another day, and one that I have covered in previous videos and will continue to cover in future videos. But yeah, I mean, there's a paradox I want to talk about with this. I mean, a great example of how men who stay home are often written off early is in romantic relationships. But what many don't seem to realize is that they tend to be surprisingly well in relationships once someone actually gets to know them. One good reason for that is because they aren't worn down from constant social performance, so they show up rested instead of depleted. That's a huge plus. But on a deeper level here, they know who they are. And so they bring to the table emotional stability. They don't bring spikes and crashes. They're not a crypto or the Dow Jones. They're steady, consolidating. Yeah, I mean, the time spent with them, it feels grounded because they aren't trying to manage impressions, and their attention isn't divided between you and whatever else might be happening nearby. They're honed in on you. And they're also honed in on themselves, hence why they want to be home. Got to work on yourself to be useful to someone else, and to meet someone on a healthy level. But yeah, I mean, life around them, it slows down in a way that feels safe and comfortable and comforting. And the paradox isn't that this isn't obvious at first. From a distance, they seem unremarkable. Sure, but up close, they change the emotional temperature of a room. They get underestimated until someone experiences them and sees what it's like to live alongside that level of calmness. Especially in contrast to the chaos that they're used to out in the world. And once that contrast is felt, dude, it's hard to go back. Truth be told. But yeah, I mean, there is of course a cost, like with everything, of choosing this life. I mean, this way of living, it asks for something that most people don't want to give up. You don't get immediate recognition. You step off the main road and no one checks on you, except for, like I said, those people earlier that are like, yeah, well, I care about you and I'm concerned, blah, blah, blah. You get that, of course, but either way, it can feel very isolating. So there is that. And you trade early approval for long-term stability. You give up being everywhere so that you can be solid somewhere. And the return takes time. It's delayed gratification. And by the time it matters, you don't need anyone else to notice. And in closing, men who stay home, they aren't running from life. They're being deliberate with how they spend it. And when you get to that middle of the road, when you hit 40, you're very deliberate on how you want to spend it. And these men, they learn early that peace doesn't happen by accident. And it has to be guarded at all costs. All costs, it must be guarded. So if you're that man, the one who prefers to stay home in the quiet, in the order, and in the depth, you relish these things, you crave these things, and there's nothing that you need to defend. You don't owe explanations for a life that works. The right people, they recognize it without being told. And the ones that are unsettled by it were never meant to.